Aloha there. Many of you haven't left the retreat. You're still
Hello.
here in our homes.
Good to see everybody. Thanks for being here and take the time to maybe say hello to everybody, every page, every quilt page. Quilt. Hmm. Good to see you. Hmm. Huh. Hmm. It's fun. Wow. Again, so many time zones. So great. Hmm. Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hmm. It does take time to see everybody. So, hello. Hmm.
We can settle into a sitting. To arrive in the moment, maybe just take in the visual landscape around you, eyes open or closed, just aware of our visual reality, receiving light waves, light particles entering through the eye sensitivity, and the field of sound vibrations entering the body through the inner ear door sensitivity. Any fragrances or flavors. Anything in the mental landscape. So tuning to mental moods, thought formations, unformed or formed. Emotions or calm, anxiety, distraction, collectedness, recognizing without any judgment just what is. And then the body door, our largest organ, sensitivity everywhere. What happens if you open awareness to the entire bodily energy field and the outline, the contours in and around your body, aware of body posture, sitting, standing, lying, leaning if you're leaning, upright if you're upright. Is the body conducive to calling forth energy? Energy to sustain the body posture, energy to sustain this present moment's awareness, the fleeting moment of knowing the experience of the body, sensation field, or groupings of sensation, or points of sensation. And if you need, adjust the body so you can feel the underlying stream of energy that supports the silent stream of this momentary awareness that arises, knows a sensation or a pattern of sensations, sounds, thought formations, disappears. And the continuous relaxed attunement to that process. Sometimes it actually feels like we're just leaning back in the moment and receiving through the different sense fields of imagination, and sound vibrations, light. Where in the body is a sense of sustaining and stabilization of these qualities of energy, mindfulness, stability, the convergence of these qualities attuned to all the natural arisings, the physical arisings of sensations and sounds and light, other senses appearing, and the mental stream. Does the mental stream feel subtle or light? Is it amped up or dialed down? Notice how the silent observing awareness itself is quite unaffected by what it's noticing, regardless of whether what we're noticing seems soft or hard, loud or quiet, intense, subtle. And the place where we anchor the whole body, areas of the body, such as the hands, sit bones, feet, or the traditional anchor, home anchor of the breath, where the awareness just rests so lightly. Not that it belongs anywhere, therefore needing no pressure, intensity, drive, force. It's right there to pick up the subtlest sensations that arise at the very beginning of an in-breath, when the abdominal area begins to rise up or expand out. Millions, myriad sensations appearing and disappearing or rolling like a wave or circle. Quality of velvet or felt or granular like sand, fabric. It's nature of movement, oscillation, pressure. Pulsation, all in the in-breath with the abdomen expanding, propelling, filling, to the very end. And how does that feel like, the end of an in-breath? And the awareness riding like being on a wave with the exhalation, and the abdominal wall collapses, relaxes, softens, lightens. A whole other myriad of millions of sensations. Maybe just catch fleeting glimpses. They're already disappearing the moment awareness notices them. And how quiet it may seem at the end of the exhalation. With the collapse, the falling sensation ends. And it seems awareness, even stretched, can find little to connect with. Often there, the mind goes off into thoughts. Holding our hand in our abdomen, we become more aware of those subtler sensations with the out-breath, falling of the abdomen, contraction. Or sometimes yogis like to be aware of their hands touching as they're folded in our laps or on our legs or knees. Just feeling the hands for a few noticings before the in-breath. As the body feels more inhabited by energy stream, the flow of silent awareness, the sense of the mind becoming collected, turning away from the pushes and pulls of distraction. Can you notice the easing of bodily formations, easing as in relaxing, dropping, letting go, the body not bracing against experience, against life. And likewise, can you notice the mental stream, mental formations also becoming more tranquil, at ease? Does the breathing then seem more natural? So these organic processes occurring, taking in a breath, taking in life. And then letting go. If we are curious in a non-doing way, it's natural to explore, feel tingling in the toes, recognize a sound vibration without necessarily assigning it a place. Or the source of the sound. The hearing is happening, sensations are happening, feelings are happening. And that great strength that's felt when we just settled in the midst of these happenings, these flows, bodily and mental rivers of experience. in the last part of our meditation together. If you wish, calling up each of the Brahma Viharas, the divine abidings, calling them up one at a time. Notice where they seem to settle in the body. May metta arise, and just with the awareness, bodily awareness, feel where the metta might visit, might settle in the body. And you call forth karuna, compassion. Do you feel the emotion of care? And where is that? How does that feel? The mudita, the emotion of empathetic joy, feeling delight in the happiness of beings, the flourishing of beings, the goodness and the beauty of beings. Where do you feel this joy residing in the body? Upekkha, equanimity. We invite equanimity to come forth from our heart. Maybe we feel it right there in the solar plexus. If we open our awareness to the whole body, we might feel it elsewhere. Or if we just let awareness be expansive and boundless, like the Brahmaviharas. What is it? How does that feel?
Thank you, Steve. Um, Many of you probably know that we were teaching a month-long program um, over January on the Brahma Viharas of loving kindness and compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity, where each weekend we focused on one and moved our way through them. It was very powerful, really wonderful, I think, for all of us to be working on those in such a kind of coherent but also spacious way. You know, these more intensive weekends and then periods of the week that were for many kind of going back to work, and for us sort of a little bit of downtime, and then some yogis really sitting full time during, you know, in the in between parts. And so we had a lot of you know, this energy built up, and right before the closing talk last Sunday on equanimity, um, the news came that there had been this coup in Burma, that the military had retaken control of the country and um, imprisoned Aung San Suu Kyi, who was elected, and her party that were, you know, elected leaders of the country, and imprisoned a lot of the other elected officials and dissolved the parliament, and, you know, as things sort of unfolded through the week. But it was clear that this was a bad event, right on the heels of our equanimity, in the midst of our equanimity practice and teaching. It was something quite powerful about that for us, I think, for myself for sure. Many of you who come regularly will know, of course, we talk a lot about Burma, Myanmar. It's a place where our tradition is really from. Um, you know, Stephen and Michelle's teachers in particular are all from there, and did a lot of practice and training there and with them. And that we go every year. In fact, we would normally have been there up until the last 2 days ago. Every year, you know, we go for January um, to run a retreat and to do our Metadana projects, where we offer sort of support to the community for various things. So it's very upsetting, very humbling, very bewildering. You know, it's obviously not just our lineage. I mean, really all, and anyone who practices mindfulness now in the West really has that um, connection, right? Because it really was in Burma around the sort of late 1800s that the monastics started teaching lay people a lot of these practices as a way to counter some of the colonial forces, British colonial forces that were strengthening there at the time. And so, of course, you know, people have lineages from other countries and other cultures, but that seed of kind of lay people being taught, and then foreigners coming and being taught, and the sort of spreading of these tools really started there. So it's a very powerful, I think, responsibility that folks have who practice in these traditions to try to understand and be of, whatever kind of support we can to what's happening. But it's, of course, also, it evokes all of these Brahma Viharas in such powerful ways, a sense of caring for people and reminding ourselves of our, love for our friends and colleagues and acquaintances there. Of course, the compassion for the hardship, the loss, the profound sense of, I think, bewilderment and grief that a lot of people are going through. Also appreciation for all the goodness that, we know is there, the beauty and culture and religion and um, diversity of the country is, phenomenal. And then also with equanimity, this immediate kind of recognition of our lack of direct power to be able to do anything in the moment. It immediately reminded me of one of my favorite Langston Hughes poems. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? And, of course, there is something universal about that question and the the reality of a dream deferred and the pain and poignancy of that, the heartache of that, the many ways that an individual heart may respond to that situation. But of course, he also writes it in as all of his writing is about the Black American experience as well, right? As a chronic condition of dreams deferred, um, based on structural oppression and racial iniquity and conditions outside of people's lives having so much negative power over so much time. What happens to our sense of hope and possibility, our dreams. He writes a lot about dreams. It's very powerful. And I think that the resonance immediately for me of just these people in this country who have had to abide for 60 years of military dictatorship and true terror, true fear of speaking out and even talking about anything political, and how hard, how generationally impactful that is, how culturally impactful it is. The sense that so many people in the country, with its many flaws and many um, unrighteous roots that it has gone over the past 5-10 years since it started to shift. um, there still, of course, was a sense that this wouldn't happen. We wouldn't be going back to this level of horror. And so there's a lot of deflation there. And so we spoke a few days ago with a nun friend of ours who's in Burma right now. It's been there for many years. And of course, we mostly just wanted to hear how she was, what was happening, for her. But at some point, the conversation, of course, went to sort of how can we help? What can we do? And um, it's still very early days, and it's still very clear that a lot of the typical things that governments might do, or people outside of the country might do are all probably going to happen and will have probably about as much efficacy as they have ever had, sanctions and, you have the whole palette, right, that could happen and all the sort of predictable responses to those. And it was very powerful for her to say, really right now, it would be wonderful if we knew that people were offering metta, offering loving kindness, practicing loving kindness. And I know there's such a way in which that can feel so almost silly, just like not tangible, not, uh, like dreamy or, like what is that going to do, right? In terms of our sense of, geopolitics and how do some humans influence other humans to to behave differently, especially around sort of distances and power dynamics. But on the other hand, where it was coming from with her was like this recognition of this deep sense of despair and isolation and powerlessness and hopelessness that people were feeling. And how important it is to know that there are friends outside, right? That the world is paying attention, that the world cares, that there are people out there who are really listening. And part of it's just that the era we're living in now around social media, that this is more tangible, more real, more immediately real in people's experience, I think, than ever has been. And the significance of that's like, undeniable. We Many of you have probably seen the email we sent on, on the 14th. We're going to try to do a, organize. This inspired us to organize something around doing loving kindness practice, particularly for a 24-hour period. People can join from anywhere at any point in that 24 hours to practice loving kindness. And so amongst the things, of course, we put it out on Facebook, put it out on Instagram, and it's been very just that. It's almost a couple thousand between Instagram and Facebook. It's maybe 2,500 people have in Burma, in Myanmar, have responded, liked it, loved it, put comments. Um, their internet connections are coming and going because the government is shutting it down and turning it back on. Of course, the people we know and have relationships with have responded, and there has been a very, it's like that's it. It's like even if no one signs up for this Zoom to do it, right? This sense of connection, of contact, of um, of human care, how important that is, how meaningful that is, how it is still in the reality of the limitations of love to control anything, right? We know we are going to take the lead of whatever the Burmese people do in terms of their organizing, in terms of their resistance, and follow that in terms of where we might be able to do ongoing kind of more practical support. But this heart connection, right? This acknowledgement of hardship, of pain, of suffering, of overwhelm, the care, the compassion, and the joy that comes from that is incredibly powerful, very real. How much we all need to um, feel the sense of goodness that is not just within us, right? That is supportive, that is sangha, that is community in its deepest sense and its broadest senses, to feel like we're capable of showing up for some of the hardships of life. It is the value, where there are also, of course, all the downsides, all the potential complications of community and sangha, and where it can be overwhelming and challenging and difficult. But the sense of heart solidarity, of contact, of connection, is very real, totally necessary. Nikki Giovanni writes in a poem called The Revolutionary Dreams, I used to dream militant dreams of taking over America to show these white folks how should be done. I used to dream radical dreams of blowing everyone away with my perceptive powers of correct analysis. I even used to think I'd be the one to stop the riot and negotiate the peace. Then I awoke and dug that if I dreamed natural dreams of being a natural woman, doing what a natural woman does when she's natural, I would have a revolution. In another poem called When I Nap, she ends with, and even if I touch the life, I hope that life knows. Oh, even if I, oh, and if ever I touch the life, I hope that life knows that I know touching was and is and always will be the true revolution. And if ever I touch the life, I hope that life knows that I know touching was and is and will always be the true revolution. And so this is our tradition, our heritage, our spiritual practice of contact, of connection, of understanding that it is through touching, physical or emotional, the sensory contact, right? The not recoiling from it, the not clinging to it, that it is in the quality of contact that transformation occurs. And how hard that can be, how hard that is internally with all of our own dukkha and craziness and fears and dreams and hopes and aspirations, and how important that is with other people. How important these practices of loving kindness, of compassion, of appreciation, of equanimity are in relationship to reality, to real people, to our own selves, our own bodies. And that it isn't always easy, it's like, where do we hold the complex truths of our powerlessness around certain kinds of behavior in the world? Where do we hold that in a responsibility to act out of love, out of care? Where do we have the sense of care that is conditionless, right? The worthiness of love of all beings, regardless of their behavior. How many of the folks right now for whom we feel incredibly sympathetic were not sympathetic to the plight of the Rohingya a few years ago, right? Is that reason to recoil from our own caring, to contract in our own sense of righteousness and love and connection and contact? These are hard for the heart, all of it to bear. And yet how beautiful it is, how important it is, how clarifying, balancing, strengthening it is, and how much we do have faith that contact, connection, the maintenance of these qualities of heart over time with ourselves, with our direct experience, with other beings in the world are transformative. But also to not be attached to the nature of that transformation or the timing of that transformation. How hard that can be. The patience it requires, the amplitude of mind and heart that requires. I've been reading this quote a few times. I can't remember if I read it on a Sunday or not, but over the last month from the Visuddhimagga about the Brahma Viharas, and I want to read it again and emphasize a few things. This is at the end of the chapter on the divine abidings, the Brahma Viharas. The yogi should, besides, understand how they bring to perfection all the good states, beginning with giving. For the great beings' minds retain their balance by giving preference to beings' welfare, by dislike of beings' suffering, by desire for the various successes achieved by beings to last, and by impartiality toward all beings. Just that great beings' minds retain their balance by giving preference to beings' welfare, dislike of beings' sufferings, desire for success to be achieved, and impartiality. To think about the ways in which our minds retain their balance through kindness, through love, through care for the well being and the welfare of others. And to all beings, they give gifts, which are a source of pleasure without discrimination, without discriminating. Thus, it must be given to this one, it must not be given to this one. And in order to avoid doing harm to beings, they undertake the precepts of virtue. They practice renunciation for the purpose of perfecting their virtue. They cleanse their understanding for the purpose of non confusion about what is good and what is bad for beings. They constantly arouse energy, having beings' welfare and happiness at heart. When they have acquired heroic fortitude through the supreme energy, they become patient with beings' many kinds of faults. To give gifts in a non discriminating way. To all beings, they give gifts, which are a source of pleasure without discriminating. And this, when they have acquired heroic fortitude through supreme energy, they become patient with beings' many kinds of faults. It is a very different kind of fortitude, different kind of energy uh, than I think we are often accustomed to in terms of righteousness, in terms of goodness, in terms of love. It is the balance of these four Brahmaviharas that allow for that, that result in that. They do not deceive when promising, we shall give you this, we shall do this for you. They are unshakably resolute upon beings' welfare and happiness. Through unshakable loving kindness, they place beings before themselves. Through equanimity, they expect no reward. This is how they bring to perfection all the good states, beginning with giving. So, with unshakable love and kindness, placing all beings ahead of ourselves, and unshakable equanimity, expecting nothing in return. Of course, we may not experience them as quite so unshakable, but we understand that capacity of heart. We have moments where the heart can be equanimous with that which is otherwise very disheartening and very painful. We can love outside of behavior and conditions, feel compassion outside of behavior and conditions, experience appreciation and joy outside of behavior and conditions. This peace of mind, this possibility that it's purifying for ourselves and purifying for others. We may have limits to our power, to our ability to control, and yet our ability to care and to have that connection means something. The ability to understand the limits of our care and the limits of our power. These things are mature spiritual practices, right? It's the most elevated and yet the most balanced and mature and realistic that we aspire to. Langston Hughes again, having known robins on the windowsill and loves over which to grieve, What can you dream of now in which you still believe? Having known snow in winter and the burst of blooms in spring, what can you seek now to make your heart still sing? If there should be nothing new, might not the selfsame wonders do? And if there should be nothing old, might not new wonders still unfold? Should nothing new or old appeal, still friends will ask, how do you feel? This is something, something similar of a what we might call a healthy disenchantment, right? To recognize the joys, to recognize the sorrows, to have gone to all of these realms in the heart, right? And that the process requires that. It requires going to all the depths of agony and despair and hopelessness and blind faith and ignorance and hatred and jealousy and delusional hope, as well as joy, right? That the heart needs to go into all these realms to understand them and to unhook from them. And to see that actually in that unhooking, it doesn't make the old wonders less beautiful. It doesn't prevent new wonders from unfolding. But maybe the heart is quieter in that stillness. He writes elsewhere, freedom is just frosting on somebody else's cake. And so must be till we learn how to bake. So we hope that you join us in our efforts to, stay connected to the, um, whether it's this right now in Burma or all of the vicissitudes of life, right, that we experience in our world, in our lives, and that we don't always talk about a lot in terms of our formal sittings, our formal teachings. There's a way that we also know that it's important to protect the mind, and just learning to be able to be with the pleasant, unpleasant, neutral of our direct experience is almost impossibly hard. And then the more we get outside of that, the harder it can be to kind of get a grip on the runaway fears and angers and overwhelm around our views and perspectives and opinions about society. And we also don't want to give you a formula of like how we think you should be operating and what's the righteous behavior for you to do in the world around these things. We offer the Dhamma and encourage you to um, make a meal of it as you will. These are the ingredients. Um, but at the same time, we understand that these are ultimately practical encouragements, right? That the joy and sorrows of the world are things that we must connect with and must acknowledge and recognize and let the heart be connected to and find appropriate places of response in our minds, in our verbal actions, our speech, our written word, and in our physical actions and physical gestures. And that, of course, these things can be crucibles for our own practice and our own understanding, and that the relationships with these emotions and relationships with the body experiences that unfold and the relationships with people and places and communities, um, individually and collectively, are also of great importance. And so we do hope that you can join us in this moment of care, as we do for all other moments of care and hardship that we experience in the world. Um, Next week we will have on the 14th this kind of 24-hour Zoom period. The Sunday sitting will still happen within that. We'll send you a different link for a different Zoom because it'll be more public. But uh, we hope you can join us, next Sunday for that, and share the word. And of course, on the website there are things that are, as more practical possibilities might emerge, there are opportunities there to get involved as well. But that we hope that you take this, as we are, as a way of sort of deepening our understanding, engaging with the complexity of practice, with some of the dilemmas around engagement in the world, and impulses, and wholesome and unwholesome in our own hearts and minds, and use it to deepen your sense of connection with goodness, and um, kindness, and patience, and generosity in the world. So we do have some time for questions if anyone has any. Um, if you don't know the drill at this point, at the bottom of your screen, there is a little button that says reactions. For most people, if you click on that, there will be a raise your hand symbol. You can click on that if you have a question you want to ask about your practice related to what we've offered today. For other folks, it might be if you click on participants, if you don't see it on the reactions button, click under participants, go to the right-hand side of your screen down there. There should be a little raise hand button there. If that doesn't work, you can just type your name into the chat and we'll call upon you. But we have a little time if anyone has any questions. Ah, there's someone. Hi, Gail. Let's see. Can you unmute there?
There we go.
Great.
Hi, Jesse.
Good to see you.
I'm thinking about what you were just talking about. I've been, I think, toying a lot with the idea and struggling, but thinking a lot about the idea of really all of the different causes we can be involved in, as you're talking about, and just really be helping with. And one of the things you said just now just made me think about this, and maybe you could say a word. It feels to me like when we feel pulled, when our heart is pulled to help, that it's often as much about taking our practice toward that and continuing, in a sense, our practice in helping others as it is just us jumping in. In other words, we don't want to do it without right speech, without, kind of having our heart in the right place. So it's not just about helping. It's really also about bringing this practice. I don't know if you could say more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. And in fact, it's, I almost, it all gets very complicated, but
Mhm.
it's like I mean, I think one of the most important things about mindfulness is that willingness to not know, but to engage and to be interested, right? So even that sense of like being called to attend to pain, even to step back from like the word help, right? It's like there's pain, there's hardship, there's suffering, there's something destructive happening in the world, and the desire to sort of show up and where like to be pulled into action through that. And then I think absolutely, it's like all levels of where is there like a lot of humility and carefulness and not arrogance in terms of our view or in terms of what we think should happen. And there's like this sort of almost the things that would fall into the realm more of like mindfulness, right? And then there is that purification of heart around motivation of anything, absolutely, of like where is our, where is it just rage? that is inspiring an action, and where is it truly love, right? Where is it something in between or fluctuating, and where do we hold ourselves capable of like our sort of highest ethical moral standards, but also understanding of course there's anger, of course there's grief, of course there's sadness, and yet to take responsibility for the results of those things, of like when we act out of anger, when we act out of impatience, when we act out of these, because it's often it's our own groups that we're working with where so much of the conflict ends up happening, right, around whatever cause. That learning to kind of be, gel and be unified amongst difference in any kind of thing, endeavoring together, very hard, so I think that, and then of course the sort of non-attachment to outcome, which is the absolutely the some of the hardest piece of where do you where do you take no measure of the goodness or the value of your effort based on reward or expectation being met personally for ourselves or even out in the world. And I think that it's like it's so powerful, it's so beautiful, you when you hear Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., speak in those last speeches where, he knows he's close to the end. He knows something is happening and he knows that he probably won't get there. But that it's like he's burst through that, right? Where it's just like clearly that has like totally irrelevant to the goodness of the act. And where does that faith come from? It's very pure, but it's very it's very approachable. It's not distant because it's faith in the goodness of something, right? It's like that actually is very uncomplicated, of like where do you have faith in something because it's right and because it's ethical and because it's moral and not because it's even effective or because it's going to get the thing you expect or that you're going to get thanked for it or all of that sort of stuff. Um, there's a great that one of his last speeches, uh, actually it may not, it's not in Memphis, it's the Ebenezer Baptist Church. He says about how the the drum major instinct, right? How many people have this, how everyone has this drum major instinct. You want to be there, uh, being thanked and being recognized for all your goodness and this and that, and how it's not actually something you need to get rid of, but you also can't buy into the pettiness of that, the little the little me that's there, and that there has to be a sense of like actually the deepest greatness comes with the deepest humility and the deepest service, and that those are those actually function to support one another, right? So yeah, I think it it has everything to do with it. And to know that, I think that, yeah, I don't know, I could go on, but I also feel like the Buddha was very clear that actually there are protective conditions for practice that support practice, that support insight, that are threatened by too much engagement. And I think it's like it has to be said in this tradition, in our practice, that's like very explicit. And so it's to say that yes, engagement in the world and engagement with things that we care about and people and family is like essential and beautiful and definitely fortifying and purifying of our spiritual practice. And if we are always trying to do these things in engagement, it's actually very hard to observe and act at the same time. That's like the essence of meditation. It's like why we sit down and close our eyes, and why no one wants to do walking meditation. Because it's like, whoa, I don't know, what is that's just like you could just like somehow learning how to move and watch it at the same time is like more than people want to do it. They're like, that's not really meditating. It's just like, it's too crazy. We're just going to sit. And it's like, okay, you get why that's so hard. It's so hard to like take a step mindfully. So, okay, we sit, we close our eyes, we go on retreat. We have these sort of spaces where our responsibilities externally are forgiven for a little while. They're let go of, they're released for some period of time so that we have like some ability to actually be interested in the heart's response to pleasant, unpleasant, neutral experience, rather than simply trying to make it how we want to be. Because that's what ends up happening. If you're just always engaged and always engaged, it's like it's for most people, it'll be too much up against the sort of some of the more subtle but powerful instincts of the heart, and it's just this sort of like effort to keep kind of pushing forward and perfecting through effort. And there's a value to that, and it can happen in many powerful ways. And yet we as yogis have to also recognize that there is a value of transformation through insight, through genuine understanding, through not trying to manipulate the mind's response to everything, for allowing greed, for allowing anger, for allowing all these things in the context in which they're not going to harm anyone else. You know what I mean? Like that they were sitting here and you see all this ugly stuff, and it's okay actually, because we start to realize we don't need to be afraid of it. It actually isn't going to harm us. We can bear it if we build the tools. But the reality is the less regard we have for that, the less dexterity and nuance and capacity we have with the mind's response to things, and the more we're engaged in the world, the more harm we actually can create, right? The more, in the name of righteousness, create lots of harm, which of course happens plenty in the world, and we're all familiar with the many ways that can happen. So I'll sort of stop. But I think it's like, yeah, I think there's a lot to just explore with that. So yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah. Michele, do you have anything you want to say to that? Molly has a question too. Oh, you got to unmute there if you want.
Let's go with Molly.
Okay. Let's see. Great.
I'm curious if you could talk more about how chanting is part of our practice, in that way of exploring it. I notice the little me in it that enjoys hearing the voice and learning words and engaging in that. But I'm also feeling like there's some transmutational power in it. I don't know. When I chant now by myself as part of practice, I feel a different heartedness, a deeper heartedness, and it doesn't get talked much about. I mean, we get to do the metta chant in our retreats, and that's important. But anyway, any I don't know anything about really how it's part of our lineage or practice, or I just like it.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'll start, but there's a lot with every question. Of course, there's so much we can say, but of course, all of the Buddhist teachings were handed down through chants because it was an oral language, right? I mean, it's like if you can imagine that we wouldn't have any of these teachings unless it was handed down through chant, you know.
Yeah.
And I, you know, that like, and I think that's very important, just to know. Just the chant is so important here in Hawaii. It's not just
Yeah.
this culture or the Latin prayers and the Christian tradition. It's like there is something very human in not just saying the words, right? That there's a way that you're in some ways you might say that it's a transmission. It's like a transmission, the vibration of the sound and the meaning, that combination of the transmission of the sound, but also the more you understand the meaning of what you're chanting, then that is meant to be going throughout the whole universe.
Mm.
So it's like an energy field. The metta chant of the metta, it's meant to be boundless. You know, it's immeasurable, right? So I think that may be much more powerful than burning sage to like change the vibration, right? It's like this, the chanting is meant to really, as I said, not only for human beings, that the written language is kind of short in terms of our history, in terms of all humans, not just a few elite that might know the language to write that and read, that has been a source of connecting with a deeper spiritual consciousness that's shared in the whole universe. You know, you can't underestimate the power of it. I think that in terms of bringing some of this into our lay communities, so far, I think that we tend to want to start a retreat formally with the chant. That's, you see it. We mark the beginning of the retreat. We might talk about this and that and the other thing to begin a retreat, but we always bring in a chant to formally mark, this is it. This is, we're entering sacred space here, right? Like this is, the chant marks the container. And at the end, the chant marks the end of that container. I know for me, you know, if I develop on self-retreat chanting with the feral cats, now that might seem a bit odd, but it's like, I feel like it is recognized by them and all the beings here. So, you know, I think there's a lot more to be said about it, but I think particularly as individuals, I think what's important to know that your understanding of the meaning will change over time. Like that's important. That's important. I mean, if I can tell you what I remember most from being a kid in the Catholic Church, it's certain melodic prayers, right? That are so deep in there. They're in there deep for a reason. It's because it has such power. And I think I'll say one more thing because I get excited about this. When anybody I've known well is dying, and it's really coming to the point where words are not the most important thing. I find that, well, I can speak just recent, of my dad, for example, who he did not want my metta chant on when he was more conceptual, and he wanted his favorite music, and I made sure that that played a lot at the hospital, right? So that music is a vehicle for often a relaxation and a uplifting of the heart. Um, but there was a certain point where I started playing the metta chant, and everyone who came in the room, the nurses, the doctors, my family, even my dad, really loved it. So I'm bringing that up more from that point of view that it's said that when we are dying, we really need to train ourselves to remember our goodness before we die. Or if we're with someone when they're dying, that you remind them of their goodness. That uplifting of the heart, the shifting into like this immeasurable loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, upekkha, equanimity. It's like the chant is meant to help us enter into those realms, the non-conceptual, immeasurable metta, the non-conceptual, immeasurable compassion, etc. It's like there's really deeply spiritual human nature. It's natural.
I think I just like emphasize that piece around your own experience as being the only validation you need to feel good about doing it, and the nature of the mind in 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 regards to physicality and space and time, it's very mysterious, and I think I would I am very careful about building belief, building strategies around effective impact based on unseen forces. Uh, so it's just that sense of like whether your loving kindness is effective, has an effect in the world outside of your direct experience. I think it's entirely possible. I think I do feel ultimately that something of that is true, that because the mind and aspects of how mind and body can interact are not just bound to this physical space we happen to be in at this point. I also think that it can't be at its most wholesome level. It has to still be unattached to that being true. For it's like you're not doing it because you think it's actually going to help someone, or that they're going to feel your loving kindness or whatever. It's like you do it because it's good, and because it's good to do this, and it feels good in the body and the mind and the heart, and it's like a wholesome thing to do, and that is enough of a reason to be keeping doing it because it's feeling good and it's working. That means it's working. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Sometimes I do feel like we don't practice, uh, and our tradition doesn't encourage a lot of these like extreme states of concentration where, people can develop all kinds of psychic powers. These are there's very practical guides to how to do that in, the Visuddhimagga and things like that. So, um, once in a while I feel like, gosh, I wish we were training someone to do some of that stuff so you could go walk through some walls and get a few people out of prison or whatever, but we'll see.
I wanted to add one more thing
Yeah.
about just that one time I had the opportunity to go to some time ago to an island in Greece that was Greek tourists went to in the summer. Greek, it was Greek, very Greek. And I went by myself to this one little spot that this friend had helped me find. And it was like a little, I guess you'd call it a little vacation rental in someone's house. But the grandfather every night, just at dusk, would go out into the little olive orchard and chant. He'd been doing it since his grandfather taught him, and it had been happening. They'd passed this down in this family for many years, many generations. And he always did it himself. And I'm speaking to maybe what Jesse is speaking of, in that I really felt like, for me, the spirits there and the whole island, it was almost like received that relationship of this care with this prayer. It was so moving to me. And I just really want to just say again, it doesn't even have to be a chant. It can be even one thought of, may you be safe and healthy. Just any of this has, as Jesse's saying, has a great power to transform our being. And that, of course, that affects everything, but we don't always see it. So that sense of, again, I want to just say, metta is without conditions. It's without conditions. It's without conditions. It's without any condition of it making an effect, right? It's like, it's just the purity of the kindness that is not partial. So anyway, that's what I would just offer, that it's very important. I think I say a lot of the time, that's like a little practice I have of my soft mental note is without conditions, without conditions, without, it's challenging, right? This world and everything we hear. And it's like, I'll just go, okay, without conditions, without conditions. Remember, it's without conditions, right? It's hard. It's not easy. Sometimes it's really easy.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Really wonderful to see you. And even though you got the email today, Michele and I are going to be both on retreat for a couple of months, but actually we are going to come to next Sunday's sitting for the metta thing. So we will see you there. But otherwise, yeah, take good care. Have a wonderful week. Feel free to say goodbye and chat to folks. Take good care of yourselves and each other.